welcome to Arts Express. This is Prairie Miller, and on the show.
This is very important. You are going to the St. Regis Hotel. Salvador Dali is there. You are going to keep an eye on him. And make sure he paints.
Well, James, welcome to Daliland.
Oh, Mango.
Alice Cooper.
Jesus Christ superstar. Who are you?
I'm James Linton.
Gala is the power. She does the deals and handles the money.
You give us money, we give you a painting.
Whatever you do, you must not insult her.
I need a new assistant. I will borrow this boy.
Because if you do, you are out.
This party's been great.
I need many beautiful asses.
Is he getting any work done? We open in 3 weeks.
How is it working for Dali?
We need money.
It's like I landed on another planet. I belong.
I need you.
What's going on?
It's complicated.
So this is a fake.
Paint!
You stole from Dali.
Salvador Dali is a genius.
I need her to push me.
Dali, there are bad things going on around you.
I give you everything.
Critics don't take him seriously anymore.
I'm just trying to tell you the truth.
Death, it frightens me. And this is the basis of my inspiration. The paint disappears and becomes reality. Sometimes it is so hard being Dali.
And those were scenes from Daliland, the new biopic burrowing into the later life and times of eccentric genius Salvador Dali, and in particular his simultaneous muse and domestic slave, the both adored and abused Gala, portrayed in the film by German actress Barbara Sukowa. And Sukowa is our guest on the show to talk about Daliland, directed by Canadian filmmaker Mary Harron, known for her politically focused, uniquely framed works like American Psycho and I Shot Andy Warhol, and casting male public figures in volatile connections with women. And Sukowa, along with her Gala in Daliland, delves into the politically outspoken women she tends to play on screen, including in Margaret Van Trotte's Rosa Luxemburg and Van Trotte's Marianne and Julian, based on the life of German Red Army faction revolutionary Ulrike Meinhof. And Sukowa addressing in this conversation as well one resolutely discerning line she speaks in Daliland, encompassing many women's lives in connection to capricious male instincts. Quote, "All these women who kiss your feet at parties, but I'm the one who cuts your toenails and brings your coffee." Here's Barbara Sukowa.
Hi.
Hello and welcome.
Mm-hmm.
What was it about portraying Gala, the wife of Dali, in Daliland that led you to want to be part of this film?
Well, there were several elements. It was a really good script. I liked the director. Once she offered me the role, I checked out her movies, which I found all very fascinating and wonderful. And then I really liked that it was about a marriage of two older people. You don't see that too often. And it is they are two very eccentric people, two very special people, and who have a hard time accepting their age and their declining health and all these things. And I thought they're very complex characters. And then a big draw was for me also that Ben Kingsley was playing Dali, which I thought was a fantastic idea. And so that's why I agreed to play this role.
And what did you figure out about Gala in order to portray her? And were any of your own ideas about her based on your research into her life?
Well, before I was offered the part, I knew very little about her. I knew that she was Dali's muse, that I knew, and of course I had seen her image in his paintings. But then I did some research, and I was quite astonished that most of the things that were said about her were very negative, And I read one book, a biography about her, and I had the feeling the author really hated her. And I was wondering, why are you writing a book about this woman if you can't find anything to love about her? And so I did more research, and I think she was just a very unusual, fascinating character. She was Russian. She lived in France. She was married to Éluard, one of the great French poets. She was very free in her sexuality. She had no respect for anybody's partner. She took whoever she liked to. She lived in a ménage à trois with Éluard and Max Ernst, another fantastic painter. And she was rich, through her marriage. And when she met Dali, she gave all this up, and she basically moved with him into a shack at the beach in Spain. And that was quite a sacrifice. And this young man, Dali, was very strange. When she first met him, she was there with her husband and with, I think it was Max Ernst, no, with a Belgian art dealer, and Marguerite, I think. He was always hysterically laughing. He seemed like very immature. He was also 10 years younger than she, very odd, very strange. And she was so fascinated that she stayed with him, and she was able to stabilize him, and you say stabilize him. And I think he would not have been what he has become without her. And I found that fascinating about this woman.
Now, you have one of the most unforgettable lines in the film that is so special about your portrayal, expressing Gala's feelings as a woman who is both adored and abused, when she says to Dali, "All those women who kiss your feet at your parties, but I'm the one who cuts your toenails, brings your coffee." What does that mean to you as both the character and as a woman in the real world?
Yeah, I mean, she felt, especially when they went to America, she felt that she was just not respected enough. And it was not easy for her to see all this, because she knew her part in his success, and she had no credit. They were all just fawning over him. And I think she had a hard time with this. I think in the scene when she's in the car and she talks to the young man, and she says that how she went out and tried to sell his art when nobody wanted it. I think it was hard for her. And yeah, it is remarkable. But she stayed with him.
Yeah.
Now, you've played a number of real-life women. What draws you to their lives, to portraying them, and the challenges, such as Rosa Luxemburg in that Margaret van Trotta film?
I do think so, because in Rosa Luxemburg, it was very much, I mean, the film was very much about her struggle to have a personal life that she wanted so much, and a political life, and the personal life that she couldn't get. She wanted children, she wanted a relation, and it just didn't work out. And if you read her personal letters, they are lovely, poetic, very warm letters, whereas politically, they called her the hysterical materialism, or they called her a monster. So I like this tension between them and between these two poles. But today, I mean, as women, we have more possibilities in that way, I think. We can more. It's still not easy to combine a career and a personal life, but I think there are more chances. I mean, these women really, really had it hard.
And what about portraying the sister of Julian in Marianne and Julian, based on the life of German revolutionary Ulrike Meinhof in Marianne and Julian, that led you to want to be part of that film and your character?
Well, it was not actually, my character was not Ulrike Meinhof, it was Gudrun Ensli.
Right, yeah.
Who was the other one.
Right.
Well, in both films, in Marianne and Julian and in Rosa Luxemburg, Margarete von Trotta tried to see they were both very much hated by the public. Because one was a terrorist, the other one was politically radical, you know. And so there's the story, for example, Rosa Luxemburg, who was on the stamp even later, that the postman in Germany didn't want to deliver a post with her stamp on, with her face on the stamp. So she always wanted to portray the other side of this character. I don't want to call it the good side, but the human side, that they are not monsters, that they are not weird outcast. You know, they were outcasts in some way afterwards, but you know, scrap that. She just wanted to show the complexity of these characters and not just the public image, which was, they were both hated by the public.
And what is it about strong political women like Rosa Luxemburg and in Marianne and Julian that draws you in?
Yeah, I did like, I think this is my fourth or fifth real life character. I did Rosa Luxemburg and Marianne and Julian was real, and Hildegard von Bingen was real, Hannah Arendt was real. Right, this is my fifth character. This kind of, I mean, they are all people who push the envelope. They're all women who, in some way or another, did something extraordinary. And I think it is just fun to sort of assimilate to them and to research them and find out about them. And I mean, Gala is the only one of those. Yeah, Gala has not created anything herself, really. I mean, she created Dali in a way, or she was part creator of Dali. Like Hannah Arendt or Rosa Luxemburg, they themselves had become the center of attention and were, you know, famous for their own writing and their own theories. But Gala was, in a way, in the background and just helped to birth Dali. But still, she did something extraordinary, and it's fun to research different times and women who just are so brave. And brave means that they also had a lot of fears, and because otherwise you're not brave. And I think that's really interesting to find the humanity and the personal life of some people who you only know publicly.
And what would you hope audiences to understand about Gala and her relationship with Dali?
Well, the first thing I think, what I would really like, that they would have fun in this film, because for Gala, somebody asked me what would Gala say about this film, and I just said I think it would be for her another party, and it's also to see behind the scenes. You know these public characters, Dali with a mustache and the way he became a superstar, and Gala, and to see the fragility of them actually in aging, and to realize that people like this are really like the birds that have the most wonderful, colorful feathers. They're a wonderful addition to the world, even if they're sometimes hard to grasp or to understand. But that they also have this other side, this fragile human side, and to see both. I think that would be nice if people could see that.
And what was it like acting with Ben Kingsley as Dali?
It was wonderful. I really loved it. It was absolutely wonderful. It was easy. It was fun. It was inspiring. It was very easy. It was just so nice. It was a really wonderful experience. I really loved acting with him.
And with your very distinguished career, when you look in the mirror, what do you see?
What I see? I don't know. I see. What do I see? Yeah, I see somebody who looks different than in all the films. I don't look like any of the people I feel like in the films that I do. It's a different person. I recognize myself.
And do you feel closer to any of your characters than the others?
Well, I tell you something, these characters that I play, they are such big people, you know? They are like, I mean, Hannah Arendt is an intellectual giant. Rosa Luxemburg was like an incredible, brave woman. So I never feel I measure up to these people. I think it's very hard to say. I guess I can't say that. I think the moment I play it, there is always a part of the character that I feel very close to. And then, yeah, they're also different. I mean, Hildegard von Bingen is this 12th century nun who's lived, you know, in a cloister is so different from Gala, who is, you know, flitting around parties. And still, there is something in both of them that that is, in a way, I can feel. You know what? The older I get, the more mysterious acting gets to me, and I can't really answer these things. I don't know.
Ha, okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
That's great. Thank you so much. Bye.
And Daliland is out now in release. And coming up next, the Palestine Laboratory, and what it has to do with author Antony Lowenstein's original research into, quote, making money from misery in his work, Disaster Capitalism.
Hi, this is Jack Shalom. For more than 50 years, the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza has been an ugly fact of life for Palestinians. But the fact of occupation has a much greater effect on the Israeli and world economy and politics than may be apparent at first glance. Now, in a new book called The Palestine Laboratory, author Antony Lowenstein shows in depth how Israel uses the occupied territories as a testing ground for its military and technological sectors and the worldwide implications of that. I'm very happy to be talking with the author of The Palestine Laboratory, Antony Lowenstein. Hi, Antony.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Antony, what got you interested in writing this book?
So I've been writing and thinking about Palestine, I guess, for a long time, and Israel. I'm Jewish. I was born in Australia, but I lived often overseas. I was based in East Jerusalem between 2016 and 2020. I've been visiting Israel and Palestine since 2005. Every 3 or 4 years, went to the West Bank and Gaza and elsewhere. And I think also probably underlying this was that I did a book a number of years ago called Disaster Capitalism, which wasn't about Palestine at all, but it was about people making money from misery in war, in mining, in different areas. And I think in the last years, and I guess maybe the stories around Pegasus, we might talk about that. Pegasus is the Israeli spyware that's found on lots of people's phones around the world. I started wanting to do work on an issue that wasn't just about the conflict itself. I wanted to sort of see the bigger picture, and I started looking into this, and essentially what I was seeing and in my research was how the occupation really has been exported, that what's happening in Israel, Palestine is not staying there. I was living in 2015 in South Sudan. What's happening there is horrific, but it doesn't really spread around the world. What's happening in Palestine does. Not the conflict per se, but the tools and technologies that Israel's been using for over half a century to control Palestinians is now found in the majority of countries in the world. As I found out, at least 130 nations have bought some form of Israeli defense equipment in the last decade. It's sort of a remarkable number, really.
Let's be clear then. Exactly why is the book called The Palestine Laboratory?
What Israel's been doing for decades in the West Bank, in Gaza and East Jerusalem is fine-tuning ways to control and manage Palestinians. Now, that could be through a range of ways, everything from intelligence gathering to spyware to so-called smart walls, biometric tools, facial recognition in the last years. And often those tools are tested in Palestine on Palestinians first. And then what Israeli companies are doing, and in fact the Israeli state itself, as I show in the book, is that they market and advertise that around the world to other countries as battle tested. In other words, to say it's worked wonderfully, so Israel says, in Palestine, it can also work incredibly well for you in your own country. You can also, not that they maybe say it like this, but what it means in practice is that people can then repress their own populations, their own minorities, dissidents, human rights activists, journalists, whatever. And this actually is a pretty effective sell, that there are a lot of countries, even ones that don't have relations with Israel officially. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. They have bought some form of Israeli defense equipment or spyware, and they're using it in pretty horrible ways against their own populations. So Israel itself, both publicly and covertly, is promoting its occupation as a positive, as something that could be copied or envied.
So in a way, Gaza is like the floor model. If you go to buy a television set, the floor model is there, and you get to see how it works and decide if you want to buy it yourself.
Absolutely. But not just in Gaza, also in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. In some ways, I guess what I try to talk about in the book is not just the tools and technologies in the simple money sense, but also what Israel is selling or trying to sell is not necessarily something financial. They're selling the idea of ethno-nationalism, this idea of Israel as a Jewish supremacist state. Yes, there are non-Jews in Israel, of course, and obviously in Palestine. But Jews are the priority. I mean, Israel proudly calls itself a Jewish state, proudly discriminates against non-Jews. There are a lot of countries, and I talk particularly about nations like India. In the last 10 years since Prime Minister Modi has come into office in India, but is creating under Modi a Hindu fundamentalist state. Non-Hindus are discriminated against. There are literally anti-Muslim pogroms. And you've had Indian officials openly praise what Israel is doing in the West Bank by bringing in Jews to settle in Palestinian territory. Exactly the same what they're doing now in Kashmir, a Muslim majority area where they're bringing in many, many Hindus to try to settle that land. And the reason that's important is I don't think India is doing all this because of Israel. Of course they're not. But they're inspired by them. And they talk about that openly. And to me, the scary aspect of this and why I wrote this book partly was almost as a warning that ethno-nationalism is on the march. It's increasing in popularity. And the ultimate model, frankly, for years has been Israel. And that to me is worrying.
You write that in 2021, the Israeli arms sales were $11.3 billion. Now, how does that compare, do you know, to other countries like the U.S. as a percent of GDP?
Yeah, so the US remains the world's biggest arms dealer. So well done, you. Well done, America, by far. By far. Israel's number 10 in the world. And there are obviously other countries before then, often Germany, France, and others. So Israel's not number one. The difference, the fundamental difference, though, is that Israel has had for decades in its backyard an occupied population that are indefinitely occupied. I mean, it's 56 years and counting. So Israel's not the number one arms dealer in the world, and I don't think ever will be. But it's on some issues, such as cyber surveillance and spyware, Israel is very much in the top 5, if not the top 1, first, second, or third. On that area, they are very, very, they're one of the best in the world, if you want to put it that way.
The decision to make arms dealing a major sector of Israel's economy goes back to Israel's founding, more or less, doesn't it?
It does. There's no doubt early on in the state's existence, David Ben-Gurion, the country's first prime minister, spoke about the need to make friends. Now, on the one hand, that's an uncontroversial thing. Of course, a new state needs to make friends. The difference was that how Israel has done that pretty much from the late 50s, but massively accelerated in the 1960s and to this day. What Israel has been doing for a long time is promoting its so-called counterinsurgency techniques that they learned in the West Bank and Gaza that you see lots of evidence in the 1970s, 1980s, a lot of Latin and South American dictatorships, including some that were committing literal genocide in Guatemala, wanting and receiving Israeli government and private advice, how to fight these wars, how to train, how to build horrendously human rights abusing armies and militias, literal death squads. This is what Israel was doing. This is how it was making friends. And one of the best, although worst, examples of these alliances to me, and I have a big section in the book about this, is
Mm-hmm.
Israel and South Africa apartheid,
Yeah.
which obviously
Mm-hmm.
ended in 1994. But it was more than just a defense deal, it was an ideological alignment. South African apartheid and Israel saw themselves both as nations facing down barbarism. They saw in South Africa, the white South African apartheid regimes thought that they were trying to survive amongst this horrible black population. Of course, that's what they said. And in
Mm-hmm.
Israel, they were fighting against what they saw was this noble, not even noble, this savage Palestinians down the road in Palestine. And you had many Israeli military leaders and, in fact, prime ministers who went to South Africa and they admired what South Africa was doing in the Bantustans. Those Bantustans were basically nominally self-ruled black areas, but were essentially had no real power at all, and wanted to copy that in the West Bank. And Israel, in fact, part of their model is very much based on South Africa to this day. And you also had South African leaders coming to Israel. There's an infamous case in, I think it was 1976, of South Africa's then Prime Minister, who was, by the way, during World War II, a Nazi supporter, not an unimportant point, being feted in Israel, supported. He went to Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust memorial in Jerusalem. And you had Israeli leaders praising this guy, we're in a fight for our existence. This is an ideological alignment.
Well, you quote an Israeli advisor in Guatemala in the 80s as saying, "I don't care what the Gentiles do with the arms. The main thing is that the Jews profit." I mean, this seems crazy to me, even under their own terms. Why, for example, did Israel sell arms to Chile's fascist, anti-Semitic military dictator Augusto Pinochet, and likewise in the 80s to the anti-Semitic junta in Argentina, where Jews were tortured? It was well known.
Alliances with anti-Semitic, quasi-Nazi-like regimes, on the face of it, seems crazy. Why would you want to partner with countries that are, as you said, killing, torturing Jews, express anti-Semitic views? I mean, it's mad. But in a very realpolitik way, it makes perfect sense. There was really little to no moral consideration at all, then or now. Now, I think when it comes to Israeli arms, they wanted friends. They also realized that after 1967, growing numbers of countries expressed publicly and privately sometimes their distaste with the occupation. They didn't support it. They thought it was totally inappropriate. They opposed it. And I think Israel was worried about that. It was worried about the potential growth of individuals around the world or countries that may start opposing their existence, opposing the occupation. And in some ways, I see the sale of a lot of these weapons and defense equipment as almost like an insurance policy. Then and now. When you have now 130 plus countries in the world that have bought some form of your defense equipment, are those countries very likely to start massively opposing you? No. Now, Israel today is a key inspiration for the global far right. And I mean, you just find even the current Israeli government under Netanyahu, the most far right government in its history, is openly, not even secretly, openly befriending far right regimes around the world, meeting up often with groups that are openly fascist. I mean, the idea as someone, and I speak as someone who's a secular Jew, would not find that abhorrent. It endangers all of us when that is happening, when the self-described Jewish state is befriending fascists openly and covertly. It has to be called out. Absolutely, it does.
Well, I wanted to ask you that because, of course, you can tell from my last name, Shalom, I'm Jewish. I mean, when I look at the list of dictators, Papa Doc and Baby Doc in Haiti, Suharto in Indonesia, Somosas in Nicaragua, Rios Montt in Guatemala, dictators in Uganda, Togo, Mali, Saudi Arabia. It's just an amazingly awful list that as a Jew, I'm totally ashamed of. And this has been a policy through all the ruling parties in Israel. And I want to ask, does it rattle you? How do you cope with that?
It does rattle me. And it's one of the reasons amongst many that I think that not just that the occupation has morally broken vast parts of the Israeli Jewish state, it's also, in my view, broken the moral backbone of much of the Jewish diaspora. in the last decades, without which Israel would not survive. But I think there is definitely a moral reckoning coming. The idea that Israel claims that the only way we could survive in the past and now is to partner with the worst dictators, mass murderers, and genociders in the world, I think is a completely not just illogical argument, but simply wrong. Yes, America also sells weapons to horrible regimes, so do the French and others. Of course they do. But I would like to think, although clearly I'd be wrong, that Jews with our history in the 20th century, and frankly before then, would be a little bit more cognizant of the price that one pays, both practically and morally, for partnering with these horrific regimes. And yet, here we are. And I think there is one of the things that's come out in writing this book, how few people knew the extent of this collusion with all these regimes. If nothing else, hopefully more people not just talk about that, but start articulating that, this is the legacy of Israel. 75 years on since its birth, this is the legacy.
Let's get down to more specifics. The day-to-day life of Palestinians is controlled not only by the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, but also very much by private contractors. What does that consist of exactly?
So in the last, I'd say, 2 decades, Israel has increasingly privatized or outsourced its occupation. And what does that mean practically? From day to day, when a Palestinian in the West Bank, for example, goes through a checkpoint, and there might be a soldier there or a private security guard, they're not going to know the difference. And frankly, for them, it doesn't make a difference, right? I mean, they're going to be maybe verbally assaulted or physically abused by those people. For them, there's no accountability, whether it's an IDF soldier or a private security guard.
So but the checkpoints are privatized.
Some of them are, not all. Some of them are. Mm-hmm. There's a growing use by Israel of facial recognition technology and biometric data gathering. Hebron particularly, but elsewhere that's often run by either Israeli companies or international companies. And just in the fact the last few months, listeners can Google this if they haven't seen this, Amnesty International put out a very interesting and relevant report looking at how Israel has massively developed and expanded a biometric data gathering system in Hebron. And Hebron often, which is, for those who don't know, one of the major Palestinian cities in the West Bank, there are roughly 1,000 Jewish settlers living in the heart of that city who are the most extreme Jewish fundamentalists. I've spent time there, and some of these people openly express desires for genocide. I mean, these are the most extreme Jewish settlers you can imagine. But within the heart of that city, so Israel can gather all this information to essentially monitor every single person going in and out, walking down the street, entering a checkpoint, talking about adults, kids, anybody. They're using increasingly sophisticated technology. And I do know, because I write about it in the book and I see it more and more happening, that is the kind of technology which is being exported, because a lot of other countries want to do exactly the same thing.
Excuse me, you're talking about facial recognition.
For example, facial recognition or biometric data gathering, absolutely, which of course is increasingly a way that states want to control their populations. But as I say in the book, in the West in the last 4 or 5 years, particularly since Trump was president, there's been this massive anti-China sentiment. And I don't speak as a defender of the Chinese regime by any means. But if we're worried about the export of Chinese repression around the world, and we should be frankly as, if not more, worried about Israeli surveillance tech being exported, because it's far more ubiquitous. This is not even a comparison around the world. Israeli technology is far more ubiquitous. So the day-to-day reality of Palestinians in the West Bank or indeed in Gaza, who obviously are not so much going through checkpoints because they're in an open-air prison, but they're being monitored by drones or various other forms of surveillance.
You talk about the Israeli tech used to control the Palestinian population is being used all around the world to control migrants to other countries, including the very building of border walls and the deployment of drones to surveil the seacoasts to keep migrants out.
Because in the coming years and decades, we're almost certainly going to see huge numbers of climate refugees coming particularly from low-lying areas, Bangladesh or parts of Asia or elsewhere. And a lot of countries, Western countries I'm talking about here, are looking to find ways basically to keep these people out. Now, what does that involve? It's surveillance technology, so-called smart walls, drones, a range of technologies. And as I give and report various examples in the book, and I'll just give two now, on the US-Mexico border, the US has deployed very sophisticated Israeli surveillance towers across the border.
And that was part one of our conversation with Anthony Lowenstein, author of The Palestine Laboratory, published by Verso. Next time, we'll return with part two of our conversation. This is Jack Shalom for Arts Express with host Prairie Miller.
Buenos días, Pedro. ¿Quieres que te corte el pelo? Aquí en la frontera de los Estados Unidos.
All my friends know the low rider. The low rider is a little higher.
Oh, yeah. Hey, man. Listen, whenever I'm in New York, I'm Tommy Chong. I kind of created Cheech and Chong. And I listen to Arts Express non-stop because it's the only show that really tells you what's going on.
The low rider drives a little slower. Low rider is a real goer. Hey.
And we'll go out now on the show, taking the Arts Express over to Red, Iowa, and Peter Wise sitting down with Iowa Blues Hall of Fame musician Pat Hazell, looking back on his life and playing some of his music as well over at the local Burlington pub, The Blues Shop.
This is Peter Wise from Red, Iowa. I'd like to introduce my friend Pat Hazell, a stupendous musician from the Midwest who's been playing for many decades now, especially blues, but also has investigated everything from electronic music to folk music in the former USSR. Pat comes from Burlington, Iowa. He's well known. He's a member of the Iowa Blues Hall of Fame and has a lot to say and a lot of knowledge about music. So, with the development of American blues, did you have that kind of atomization from the Deep South or the Delta, where each town had its own special?
No, I don't know that about American blues. I think there must be some of that, almost, especially if it's a population of people that stayed pretty much in one area, and then you probably have some of that. I mean,
like Appalachian music, for instance, like Appalachian music.
There are definitely different styles of music, depending on where you're at in the South. Compared to, like, the music you would hear in Louisiana will be different than the music you hear in Kansas City.
But it's more likely to be small townish, like in the Appalachians, where you're separated by geographical obstacles.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true?
It could be, yeah. And also you got probably a lot more influence in Appalachia of the white Scottish Irish people. Yeah, I mean, really a lot more of that kind of thing going on. But you have that down in the Deep South too. I'd say one of the big differences. Now I don't know. I have not very little, no experience basically of Eastern Appalachia at all. I've never been there, but I know down south how hot and humid it can get, and I came to the conclusion that if you're going to play music down there, it would naturally lend itself to slow blues.
Well, I think yeah, sure. It reflects its environment, I guess. You were keeping Mother Blues going. You were performing.
Some of them
as
were
a
part of
blues
Mother
man.
Blues, and we would just kind of slowly morph the two together.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And you even fronted for Jefferson Airplane when you were in.
Yeah, and Led Zeppelin,
and Led Zeppelin too. Yeah,
and there were many others that we opened shows for.
Yeah, well, we shared that Led Zeppelin experience.
Oh, yeah.
Something I will never forget, to tell you.
Yeah, Led Zeppelin,
yeah. So why don't we listen to some of your music, if it's okay with you? We got one piano. We're sitting in the blue room?
Well, the Blues Shop.
The Blues Shop
Yeah.
in Burlington, Iowa, and it's vacated right now because Patrick's son has shifted his blues club over across the street to a place called the Washington. And before you start playing, can you tell people where to find your music?
Well, I have a website which I, to this day, don't know how to work. You know, I don't have a lot of patience with the internet. I really don't. Mm-hmm. But you could go to iTunes, or what are some of the others?
Spotify?
I think they're on, some of the stuff's on Spotify.
Mm-hmm. SoundCloud, maybe?
Maybe, I don't know. And you can go to Reverb Nation. Has a nice lineup of songs that I recommend.
You don't play live anymore, is that correct?
Very, very rarely.
Okay, so you'd have to come to Burlington basically to hear you live.
Unless somebody comes along and really floats me a ride, some good pay, and puts up the equipment for me. Not being very famous, that is difficult.
Right. Well, Pat's going to play some boogie woogie, I think, or are you going to
I'll just play some blues.
Okay.
I got to play that's something that fits into my 77-year-old speed.
All right. Okay, well, I'm right behind.
You've been my desire. I say, babe, what in the world can I do? What can I do to get through to you? Yeah, I'm strolling, baby, looking for my nighttime lover. Oh, then I find you.
Fabulous Pat Hazell and his music. We're going to wrap up now, but
Okay.
do you have any final comment? Do you have any advice for anybody that want to get into blues? Your kind of blues, traditional blues. I don't want to say conventional blues; none of them are. But I mean, the way it was in the '60s, at least.
The '60s. Well, there was a huge divide in the '60s with the, I don't know what the British invasion or what, but blues was really generated out of the black community, and the black community really changed in the '60s, and went away from playing straight blues, that's for sure. And the white blues that replaced it was a very poor replacement, although it did, but
it at least led to other people learning about the traditional blues, Delta blues, rural blues.
it did do that. I'll admit that, but at the same time, what came out was the guitar blues. And the guitar-based blues was not the blues I grew up on was the big band blues, and also the blues that was all generated out of the piano. And the piano dates way back in the old logging camps and all that kind of stuff. But the piano blues is a different form, and I think you got to really dig back a ways and listen to the old stuff. Listen to a lot of stuff from the 1920s and the 30s, 1940s.
Cool, yeah. So listen, we're going to wrap this up, and hopefully we'll have more interviews or conversations.
Sure.
I think it's more conversational if you consent to that sometime. You're a
fine with me.
veritable encyclopedia. So, it's been wonderful. Pat Hazell, what more should we say? Burlington, Iowa. We can talk about more history of yours in playing, I think, maybe in the 70s next time. I'd be interested in your impressions of Paul Butterfield when he played up here.
Yeah, I didn't. I saw Butterfield in where the hell did I see him?
Iowa City, probably.
No, I think maybe it was Grinnell or someplace like that, Newton, Iowa, or someplace weird.
That's amazing.
But somewhere different, and But Butterfield, yeah, I did see him, and he was an influence. I mean, we did a couple of Butterfield songs back in the 60s.
That's right, yeah.
And another one was the, the hell am I thinking of, that band out of San Francisco?
Steve Miller Band?
No, Nick Gravenides was in it.
Oh, Electric Flag.
Electric Flag.
Yeah.
And they had some of the old Butterfield's gang was in that.
They did,
band.
yeah, Martin Afflin for one.
Yeah, and the Mike Bloomfield.
Yeah, of course, Mike Bloomfield, right. So how did you avoid all that? I mean, there were some sad stories with the fate of Butterfield and Mike Bloomfield. Were you lucky, or was...
Well, that had a lot to do with drugs.
Yeah, and alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was never a big one for drinking a lot of alcohol. I never had that problem.
Well, that's great, you know.
Never.
You're here and they're not.
Well, I just, it didn't interest me that much.
Yeah.
And as far as getting into heavy, I did my share of drugs, but it was not
habitual. Good. Hey, okay. We're gonna wrap this up, so I'm gonna say goodbye to Pat. Incredible. I want to thank you. Honored to be.
Well, thank you for your interest in.
Oh, sure.
Do it.
Yeah.
And that's all we have time for today on Arts Express, expression in the arts. And if you'd like to express yourself too, you can write to us at theradiogoddess@gmail.com. Until next time, this is Prairie Miller leaving the station.